Today, we're going to be speaking with Andrea Chalupa, host of the Gaslit Nation podcast, wrote and produced the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, recently adapted into the graphic novel In the Shadow of Stalin. You know, Andrea, I'm so glad to have you on today. I think that you're perfectly suited to addressing a reality among my audience, which is a growing feeling of despondency, checking out, the belief that maybe there is no way to resist what may be coming in the United States. We see the nominees, we see the authoritarian ideas of jailing the January 6th committee members, militarized mass deportations, all of it, right? You know it, the audience knows it. How should we, just like as a general entry into this topic, is the despondency rational? But more importantly, from a tactical perspective, are there things that we can do over the next 2 and 4 years?
Yeah, I'm actually, all of us have to personally make the commitment that so many who have fought this fight before us have had to had to make. And that is quite simply, you have to commit to making the coming years some of the most productive and creative years of your life. And I know that sounds very far-fetched, but one of the things I've been doing to prepare for this time, because it was always a possibility that Trump would come back. We had Merrick Garland and the DOJ not holding him accountable, wasting a lot of precious time, and on the list goes. And the media increasingly becoming oligarch owned and normalizing Trump and his fascism and so on. And we can do like a whole series on how we got to this point. And I have on Gaslit Nation. But when I saw this coming, I started telling my audience, like, you need to find your historical mentor. So I
Hmm.
have several historical mentors, and one of them is J.R.R. Tolkien, who lost several of his close college friends in the Great War. The Great War was pure carnage. It just fields of Europe littered with bodies, littered with dead horses. It was like the mouth of hell opened up across Europe. And in that despair, being so lost in that dark time, J.R. Tolkien could have just succumbed to that darkness like so many did. Instead, he began writing the works that would become Lord of the Rings and all of his other classics that are getting us through the times that we're now in today. And so you don't have to be a great novelist. You don't have to be a poet like he was, but you do have to have that something inside of you that maybe you felt as a child. Maybe it's a very private part of yourself, a part that gets you out of the bed in the morning, like some larger dream that you have. Maybe it's a dream that you don't even dare speak to those closest to you. It could be even, you dream of doing comedy, you dream of doing stand up, you dream of traveling. Whatever your inner dream is, we need that from you now more than ever, because we are up against a confederacy of trolls. They're going to be deliberately trying to um, psyops us, like basically demoralize us. They're going to threaten us with lawsuits. Bannon already is coming out with threats against lower level uh, MSNBC producers. Like, I'm going to go after all of you. I'm going to make you, force you back in the homes with your families. You're going to be broke. They're going to be doing that against all of us across the board because they get off on it. And so the anecdote to that, the way to push back is find your historical mentors, find your creative projects, and commit to building something of lasting value in these coming years. During the first Trump regime, I made my film, Mr. Jones. I figured out how to build a team, find a director, raise $10 million. I produced the very first screenplay that I ever wrote during the first Trump years. I hardly ever listened to podcasts. I built Gaslit Nation during the first Trump years. I've never organized a march before. I got the March for Truth off the ground. I figured all this stuff out as I was going along, and I found a lot of incredible allies, a lot of brilliant partners along the way. So the first era of Trump, which was a devastating one, especially for me and my family. I don't know if you know this, but my sister was personally targeted by Trump, by the Kremlin. They made her a target of Trump's first impeachment case. Devin Nunes said my sister's name dozens of times. My sister is Andrea Chalupa, the independent DNC contractor who risked her life and career to point out the obvious fact that if longtime Kremlin operative Paul Manafort, who brought Ukrainian Trump, Viktor Yanukovych, to power, and he was now running Trump's campaign for free, that meant the Kremlin was running Trump's campaign. And that meant the Kremlin was trying to basically install its puppet and do a corruption state capture like it's done in countries like Georgia and Ukraine. Yanukovych, by the way, was overthrown in a popular uprising, and he's still in Russia to this day. And he's just been joined by Assad, who was just overthrown in a grassroots rebellion uprising led by Syrians and, yes, backed by US and Turkish forces. So that's a lesson to all the kleptocrats that we're up against today, is that you are not inevitable as much as you want to convince us that you are. Your regimes will play out, like usually through self-destruction, as history shows us. And there's a lot that we can do in the meantime to build resistance to you and to build creative projects, capturing the history as it's happening. So we leave a historical truth, a historical record. And what that does ultimately is it leaves legal cases that we could bring to international criminal courts, because it's not just the laws they're going to use against us here. It's the laws that we can use internationally to hold them accountable and keep them in check.
When it comes to legislatively, it seems that we are spread really thin right now, with Republicans taking the House, the Senate, the White House, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel controlling Department of Justice, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence. Like, this feels palpably different than the first Trump term in some critical ways. At the state level, a lot of state legislatures passing, everything. Texas is going, they want to ban THC. We're talking about abortion and women's rights and all of these different things. When people are spread so thin, it feels overwhelming. Some say, well, just pick one thing. Is that a good approach?
So absolutely. So we cannot go back to how it was during the first Trump term, where you'd wake up first thing in the morning and you'd check your phone and you'd go to bed reading your phone, and your nervous system would be attached to Twitter. And because when you do that, you're wasting a lot of precious time, and they're overwhelming you with that chaos on purpose to demoralize you. So the best thing you can do is to stay grounded. As I said before, like, find your project, pick your project, whatever that project is, because that's going to be inoculate you against demoralization. The second thing is adopt groups that are on the front lines of fighting for our democracy. That's not the Democratic Party establishment, right? They spent this entire election telling us that Trump's going to come in and he's going to be Hitler. And then when the election came and they lost it, they just disappeared, right? And they're not talking to us with that same plain spoken language saying, okay, folks, this is what we now need to be doing. They're not leading us. They just went on vacation. They took trips. And so the Democratic Party establishment is not it. It was never it. It's always been the grassroots. In Ukraine, what overthrew Yanukovych was a diverse grassroots coalition. In Ukraine, they have a political party called Self-Reliance, and that's the model we have to follow here at home. It's self-reliance. So there's a lot of brilliantly self-reliant groups that have been doing incredible work in some of these Republican hostage states. So that is Black Voters Matter, right? Which is, Black people have no choice but to fight. Like, the whole history against authoritarianism in America has been led by Black people, namely Black women. And then we have a wonderful organization called Run for Something, which helps progressives, young people, get into the system to become the new leaders. That did not exist when I was coming up in the world. My first job out of college, I was a community organizer. I was told to go stand in the streets and register people to vote. Today, coming out of college, I could be recruited to run for office. That's new. That's a political sea change in America. So setting up automated donations to groups like Black Voters Matter and Run for Something, doing that now, $5, $10, whatever you can give a month, just setting it, that is going to allow those organizations to build their funds so they can start staffing up now for the fights ahead. The other thing you want to do, because the news cycle is going to be devastating. Every day it's going to be like 6 scandals, and they'll all get forgotten the next day by all new scandals. So, and that again is deliberate, to demoralize us and to wear us down, so we just give up and just go along with our business. That's what the Russian opposition did. The Russian opposition succumbed to that nihilism. Well, there's nothing we can do. We marched. They arrested some of us. We tried. And where did that get us? Russia just grew more and more powerful and started invading their neighbors. And so we cannot go down that path of nihilism. We have to be more like the Ukrainian model: fight, believe, be relentless. And so another thing I'm calling on people to do on Gaslit Nation is adopt a kleptocrat. There's going to be a cabinet of billionaires in Donald Trump's White House. Adopt one of those guys. Put Google alerts on for that person's name. Create a folder where you save the PDFs of articles investigating them. Become a historian of their crimes, of rolling back life-saving regulations and so on. amplify what they're doing. Just become an expert in that one person. Why does that matter? Because number one, that will scare the hell out of them if we're that organized and that focused. Number two, by amplifying their crimes, you'll also be amplifying the groups trying to stop them and building power and visibility for those groups that in turn turn into donations. So my whole point is, get organized now for what's coming. Prepare yourself now for what's coming. Set realistic goals now for what's coming. And understand that we're not the first group of people ever in human history to have to face off with this. So find your historical mentors. I'm leaning heavily right now, as I mentioned, on J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm reading a great biography on him right now. I've been reading the original works of Albert Camus, a great Algerian French writer who, during the darkest hours of Nazi occupation of France, wrote a brilliant series called Letters to a German Friend, where he wrote to this mythical German saying, you think you're winning. You think you're winning. I'm letting you know that you've already lost, because we're on the side of truth. We are on the side of life, and life is stubborn. So Camus, during the darkest hours of France, was telling the French people, we've already won. We've got this. And they were right. So that's the kind of attitude you have to encompass and live now. You cannot allow them to be scared. Bannon is a disgusting human being. He physically looks decrepit. Who he is on the inside is rotting him from the outside. Do not let that kind of person win and keep you up at night, right? Monsters are real. We know from Assad, we know from Putin, we know from Bannon and Trump. But the biggest power the monsters have is to scare you. Do not let them scare you. Focus on being creative, focus on building something of lasting value, focus on making these years the most productive years of your life. Because if you don't, if you surrender in advance, if you choose the path of nihilism like the Russians did, then think about how awful we'll be the planet will be in 10 years, 20 years from now. We still, right now, in the short window of time we have left, stand a fighting chance. And I'm telling you this as the daughter of refugees. My parents spent the first 5 or so years of their lives in a World War II refugee camp. They came to America with whatever they could carry. Both of my grandmothers were hotel maids. They had to build from the ground up. And in my family, survival for us was always being defiant against the great odds, always being creative in the face of all this oppression. And so I'm not just coming from you from some comfortable suburb. I'm coming from you from my own personal family history, that we've gotten through these dark chapters before, and we have no choice but to get through it again.
You mentioned the kind of fire hose of chaos and the 6 daily scandals supplanted by 6 new scandals the next day. From a tactical standpoint, there's this kind of reality where if everything is an existential crisis or a massive scandal, then kind of nothing is. And at the same time, every single day, or today I was talking about Harmeet Dillon being nominated to run civil rights at DOJ for Trump. That is a scandal when it comes to voting rights. We know Dillon's passed. That is a major problem. At the same time, we've got RFK, who wants to reinvigorate the search for vaccines causing autism and raw milk. And all of these things are genuinely huge, but also you get desensitized when everything is huge. What do you do about that? And who does what about that?
Well, you have to pick your battles, because otherwise you'll become emotionally exhausted, and you have to build with solidarity with the groups that are most aligned with yours. So I've mentioned Syrians because as a Ukrainian American, my battle has been democracy for Ukraine, fighting corruption in Ukraine, including Kremlin-backed corruption. I was very early in pointing out that what the Kremlin did in Ukraine, they're now doing through Trump, right? Through this weaponized corruption. And people thought I had some, psychic powers. I'm like, no, because Ukraine is my lane. So I picked my battle, I picked my lane, I stayed in my lane, and I worked in solidarity with organizations that overlapped with my lane. So when Putin's total invasion broke out, a wonderful group of Syrians, I reached out to them, and I had them on Gaslit Nation, and I translated their lessons for Ukrainians from fighting a total war with Russians into Russian, into Ukrainian, circulated that in Ukraine. So you have to find the groups so you choose your lane, stay in your lane, and then build together with groups that overlap with your lane. And you have to have something in your pocket, something ready to say to yourself when the news overwhelms you. It's a totally normal human reaction to want to just catch your breath, maybe stay in bed a little bit longer that morning, kind of zone out a bit. But then you have to take a shower, dust yourself off, have something to say to yourself when those moments get dark. For me, what I have ready is J.R.R. Tolkien. As I mentioned, I have that image of him as a young soldier, having lost some of his closest friends who were helping him find his own voice as an artist, and now they're gone. Imagine the talent, the potential that we lost with those young men. they could have been other J.R.R. Tolkien's themselves, and they're gone. And so imagine that grief and devastation that he came out with, and after all the carnage that he saw and how he himself was almost killed. All right. And he continued to build, to work, to bring beauty out into the world. And so you have to have that historical mentor, that's something, that quote in your pocket that you're going to breathe in like a deep breath for your soul to sort of stay grounded and just pick your battles, find your lane, stay in your lane, work in solidarity with those who overlap with your lane. And be sure, again, just get yourself organized now. Set up your automated donations to Black Voters Matter, Run for Something, and be on their list, get their emails, like volunteer a couple hours, find the mutual aid societies where you live locally that are soup kitchens, helping asylum seekers get the hell out of America safely, whatever that might be. So find the mutual aid societies locally where you live, because they're going to be the eyes and ears of your community, the early warning system of what's coming. And don't accept what's coming, because right now we are in a lull of this quiet Biden time. People are settling down for the holidays. Yes. But as they come in to power, they're going to make a very big show of it, because that's who Trump is. He's a showman, and fascists love that pageantry. And they're going to shock and awe us in those early weeks, early months. And you yourself, no matter how prepared you might be for it, you might feel despondent. You might have a moment of feeling completely rocked by it. It's going to pass because you're ready. You prepared, you did the work. And you need to prepare and do the work now so you can be stronger for those who aren't prepared for it, who might have some sort of reaction. Like, prepare for an uptick of fights, because when people get stressed and scared, they start fighting with each other, including a lot of fights happening online in those early weeks and months. I've seen it again and again, of a lot of good resistance movements cannibalizing each other when they get scared, when uncertainty hits.
Yes.
But if you have your list of meaningful actions that you can take, if you have your commitment that no matter how dark it gets, you know who you are, you know what your values are, you are committed to staying human no matter what. You are committed to being brave no matter what, just like your mentors who came before you in history, okay? Just know who you are. That's number one. And you will not lose that. Hold on to that humanity. And I'm telling you, as someone who has studied a lot of dictatorships past and present, we in the United States still live in a luxurious situation as far as our rights go. I know it doesn't feel that way because we've lost so much since the Reagan Revolution in this country, and the income inequality has exploded. And that is what has contributed to the rise in fascism. There's three factors that contribute to the rise in fascism: massive income inequality, political instability, which we saw with January 6th, and Republicans having an all-out assault on voting rights across this country, and rampant disinformation, as we're seeing with the rise of social media and oligarch consolidation of media, like David Zaslav and so on. And so the bottom line is this: we have so much working for us that we have to not take for granted. We have a luxurious situation as far as Ukrainians are concerned. We don't have missiles lobbing over our heads every night. Okay, we can go to bed and not have to be woken up in the middle of the night by the sirens telling us we need to get into the basement right now. There is a massive sleep deprivation crisis across Ukraine right now, which Putin initially creates to terrorize that country into submission. And they refuse to submit. They refuse to hand over their country because it's their country. And so what I'm telling you is just part of our resistance, part of our strategy is to take stock of what we do have, what strengths we do still have, and take full advantage of those while we have them. I personally, from what I've seen all these years, I'm not worried about the next coming years. I'm worried about the next 10, 20 years, right? If we give them ground now, if we don't do the work, if we don't amplify the organizations that need our help through our donations and through our volunteer hours, if we don't do that work, plant those seeds of change, it's going to be game over 10, 15, 20 years from now. We still have a fighting chance right now. And I'm calling on all of you not to take that for granted.
Yep. Yes, and that's exactly the point I've been making to much of my audience as well. We've been speaking with Andrea Chalupa, host of the Gaslit Nation podcast. So great to talk to you, and we will be listening.
Thank you so much.